everyone. My name is Jackie Otwell, Maryland Braille Challenge Coordinator and teacher of the visually impaired at Maryland School for the Blind. I would like to welcome you to our webinar, Picturing the World, Tactile Literacy for Learning and Creativity. This presentation is part of the 2021 Maryland Regional Braille Challenge webinar series, brought to you by Maryland School for the Blind's Outreach Department. We are so excited to have staff and volunteers from the New York Public Library's Dimensions Lab with us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. We have Chancey Fleet. Chancey is an Assistive Technology Coordinator at the New York Public Library and co-founder of the Dimensions Lab, where blind and sighted community members can freely create tactile graphics and 3D models. Chancey is a 2017 Library Journal Mover and Shaker and serves as the president of the National Federation of the Blind's Assistive Technology Trainers Division. We also have Nefertiti Matos joining us. She is an assistive technology trainer at the New York Public Library. In this role, she provides one-to-one individual coaching and leads group workshops on a range of tech topics in both English and Spanish. She serves on the working group for the Sensory Tools for an Interpreting Historic Sites project, a collaboration with the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum and NYU Ability Project. And then last but not least, we have Lauren Race. She is an accessibility designer and researcher at the NYU Ability Project and Twitter. Her research focuses on designing and evaluating accessible educational tools and removing barriers to information access. Please use the chat feature to ask any questions or to make any comments. I will be posting a poll at the end. And I'll also be including a link to the Maryland Regional Braille Challenge website at some point. So ladies, we are so excited to see the information that you are going to share, and I'm gonna let you just take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Welcome everybody. My name's Chancey and we're gonna do visual descriptions tonight. So I am a white woman in my 30s and I am wearing a purple 3/4 length shirt and I have a maple seed bronze cast necklace on, and I will turn it to Lauren.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Race. My pronouns are she, her. I am a feminine presenting white woman with blonde hair and pink cat eye glasses, and I'm wearing overalls, which are very comfy, and my background is of a map of the world.
Nice. Hi everybody, good evening. I'm Nefertiti Matos, and I'm a cisgendered Latina woman in her 30s, brown skin, brown eyes, brown hair, lots of brown going on. It's beautiful. And right now on your screen is a photo of me because my camera is acting pretty funky. But it's basically a close-up of my face. And yeah.
All right, so the first thing I want to do tonight is kind of ground you in what we do at the New York Public Library and what the Dimensions Lab is. We're only going to talk about that for a few minutes because most of what we share we hope will be directly impactful to you tonight. But I want to tell you why there is a Dimensions Lab. So back in 2016, when I had been working in my role as Assistive Technology Coordinator for about 2 years, the phone rang with a blind reference question, which is a very common thing. We get all kinds of blind reference questions at the library, and we love it. Some of them are about tech, some of them are not. This one came from someone who was a C-level officer at a major blindness organization. He was moving to New York City, and he wanted to know where we could find a map of the 5 boroughs because he wanted to understand how the boroughs relate to each other and to the waterways. And I had to pause and think to myself, first, I have no idea where to get such a thing. And second, I have no idea, and I have lived in New York myself for 10 years. And I started to ask myself, why is it that the average blind person on the average day can't get a hold of the average map in the form of a tactile graphic? And I realized that it's for a couple of reasons. One, most tactile graphics embossers, swell form machines, and other equipment are in the possession of publishers or educators. They're not always accessible to blind people directly. Blind people don't learn how to use them. They're not always affordable to blind people directly. And we're very used to getting tactile graphics from our textbooks or from our educators. And so going from wanting to know a thing to knowing that thing through a tactile graphic is not automatic for us. And I realized that the other reason we don't have steady access to tactile graphics is that that dynamic sets us up not to demand tactile graphics. If we don't have access to graphics that often, we probably underrate the importance of graphics. We can live a life without images. We can live a life without pictures, infographics, and even maps. That exchange inspired me to apply for an innovation grant through the New York Public Library and start the Dimensions project. We started with a small grant and a few donations in kind from the New York State Commission for the Blind. We ended up with donations in kind from Ultimaker, a long-term loan from the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco, and the donations of expert instructors who came and donated their labor and their time. And so what we have now is a lab that is open to people who are blind, sighted, or anywhere in between, where folks can come in and use our tactile graphics equipment. We have 2 tactile graphics embossers, 3 3D printers, a swell form machine that makes tactile graphics from microcapsule paper, several 3D pens, and a range of analog hand tools. More importantly than the equipment that's there, free to use except for the cost of paper or filament, is our community of practice. We have 3 skill building workshops. One called Tactile Tactics, grounds folks in the basics of composing a tactile graphic that's legible and uncluttered and aesthetically pleasing and meaningful to a blind reader. Lauren will be talking to you more about some of those principles. We have a workshop on tactile graphics made with embossers and swell form machines. So we like to call them 2.5D tactile graphics. And we have a workshop specifically on the mechanics of 3D design and working with 3D printers. Probably the most important thing we offer, though, is a community of practice where blind and sighted people can come together, share designs with one another, and iterate towards designs that are meaningful, legible, and get a particular job done. We believe that individuals should have access to graphics when they want them on the subjects that they want, whether the subject is something as complex as an infographic or a stock chart or the anatomy of a cell, or something as simple as a holiday card or a design or a set of cursive letters to help somebody practice their handwriting. So that's the Dimensions project. We would be super thrilled to see similar open access labs popping up in other places around the country or the world. We've heard some stirrings from other local communities of folks that might want to do something similar, but we really believe that images are for everyone, images matter, and image poverty is avoidable. And with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague Nefertiti, who's going to tell you a little bit about the impact of tactile graphics and images in her life. Over to you, Nefertiti.
Okay,
Yep,
am I unmuted now?
you are.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Chancey. All righty. So whether you're sighted, visually impaired, or blind, developmentally, touch begins at birth. Even sighted infants have low vision. So tactile stimuli is a huge part of early development. Tactile graphics are a vital part of inclusion in education, employment, transit, and many other areas. The human experience, though, is a highly visual one. We all too often convey information visually. So people who don't have access to visual cues because of blindness tend to get excluded from educational, practical, and recreational information. It's crucial to provide children accessible versions of visual information at the same time as their sighted peers. I say all of that to let you know that sadly, my experience growing up was one of deficit in this regard. Too many adults in my life thought it easier to simply let me slide by. I was offered more art classes and a lot less math and science ones. I thought at the time this was great, right? I always excelled in the arts. And, I just thought, great, I'm doing what I want. Who needs that? If I know 1 + 1 is 2 and I can, divide to make change at the store, what else do I really need? Well, I didn't know at the time that I was actually doing myself a great disservice. And the adults that should have known better never pushed themselves to push me. This is why in my 20s, I found myself really struggling through some rudimentary concepts in math and science. Fortunately, I was able to find my way to a non-judgmental, supportive crowd. But the truth is that I had to really sort of scramble and claw my way to what I now know. If I stop to think about it, and when I have stopped to think about it, Chancey can attest to this, I get pretty down on myself. I feel like, what if this or what if that? But I've learned to choose to focus on what is. And what there is access and inclusion in all of its impactful forms. And tactile graphics is definitely one of those forms. The fact that you're here tonight tells me that you're on your way. You're taking a big step, and it's an informed step by being here and challenging yourself to learn more about what's possible. And on behalf of every misguided kid, like I was for a time, thinking that I was getting away with something, I really want to thank you. So, what are tactile graphics? Tactile graphics convey non-textual information to people who are blind or have low vision. These may include tactile representations of pictures, graphs, diagrams, maps, and other images. In the same way that a sighted person can look at a picture and other visual images, a person who is blind can feel raised lines and surfaces in order to obtain comparable surfaces. Tactile graphics can be created with a computer graphics program, which can then be embossed using a Braille embosser with graphic capabilities. This produces those raised line designs. Some tactile graphic types or types of tactile graphics are thermoform. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chancey or Lauren, but I think thermoform is one of the more common methods of producing tactile graphics. This process is also known as vacuum forming. And thermoform, just briefly for those who may not know, it's a process where a sheet of plastic is heated and vacuumed on top of a master. The master can be made of any substance or most substances, I should say, though there are some materials that are more durable than others. Then we have swell form. This is another method for tactile graphics. Swell paper is used for this. It's a paper coated in some special heat reactive chemicals. Microcapsules of alcohol are implanted in the paper, and when they fracture, when the heat is applied to it, the surface of the paper inflates, making it easy to feel. If you place black ink on the paper before the heating process, this will provide some control over the raised surface areas. This type of graphic, I believe, is not as robust as thermoform, but it is produced, I think, with less effort and less expense. So that's an option. I want to say, before turning it over to Chancey to tell you a little bit about 3D printing, or 3D printed, I should say, tactile graphics, that the advantage, I should say, of the computer method is that they allow for sharing and easy modification of the original tactile graphic without degrading it. So this is, again, the computer. You go in there, you make your design, you can go back in very easily, make whatever changes or alterations you might want to make. Do note that if you're blind or visually impaired, this is a lot more difficult than it would be if you were sighted. The software just isn't necessarily conducive to us, but there are ways to work around this. We do design as blind people. I was going to say that with thermoform, you can produce different tactile graphics with varying variations in height and in texture. So it's a little more durable with thermoform as opposed to swell form. Okay, Chancey, would you like to say something about 3D printed tactile graphics?
Sure. I wanted to chime in and say a little bit about embossed graphics. So embossed
Sure.
graphics are kind of pixelated, right? They use a denser array of dots than Braille would use, maybe up to 50 or 100 dots per inch, depending on the embosser. And they also permit up to 8 or 9 dot heights for more advanced embossers, but they don't provide as much depth of texture as thermoform or swellform. So thermoform is really good for collage or depth of texture and can make really bold reliefs that are particularly good for young children. Swell form is high contrast. You can use black ink and you can also have raised textures. So that can be really great for people who have CVI or people who are using their vision and their sense of touch as well. But the Braille that's incorporated into tactile graphics is going to be of a higher fidelity if you're using a Braille embosser. And if you're only able to get one device, a Braille embosser has the advantage of being able to produce all the Braille that you need and also potentially produce graphics. Swell form is also a little more on the expensive side. The actual machine is less expensive, maybe $1,300 or $1,400, but the swell form pages can run you about $1 a page, which can add up quick. If you have a Braille embosser, you can use Braille paper, which is relatively affordable, or even you can use copy paper. So it's all about looking at the equipment that you have available, making a good choice there, and just being aware of the limitations of each particular form. And we'd be happy to talk to you about some of those specifics one-on-one if you're looking to make a particular type of graphics. You will hear a lot of buzz about 3D printing for tactile graphics, and it's not without merit. So 3D printing works really well when you want to create a tactile graphic that is going to be durable, that a lot of people are going to handle. So maybe it's a map of a school, and maybe that map is going to be consulted by a lot of students. Maybe it's even going to be the basis for a thermoform later. 3D printing is also really good if you need a deep and detailed high fidelity bas relief. If you look at some of the work coming out of a company called 3D Photo Works, you'll see things like Neil Armstrong's footprint on the moon, Washington crossing the Delaware, and many more high fidelity museum quality images. Those were created in deep relief using a 3D printer, and they provide a level of detail and relief that we don't get from a standard, fairly flat tactile graphic. 3D printing can also be useful if you're making stencils, if you're making Braille tools or accessible tools that you yourself may need or your child may need. You can print out your very own tactile accessible protractor or your very own Braille slate. You can print out Braille dice and many other useful accessible things. But 3D printing is not for the average image on the average day. For most images, including basic street maps, including images that you might use to decorate a card, infographics, maybe you're looking at COVID trend lines or stock trends. Most images do not need to be a 3D print. The other time that 3D printing can really shine is if you want to create a three-dimensional model of something. One of the kind of limiters on non-visual perception is that we have a hard time getting our arms around something if it's too big, or zooming in on something if it's too small, or if it's too far away or too dangerous or too delicate to touch. So for example, we have in our rare books collection at MYPL, we have these cuneiform, which are ancient Sumerian tablets showing the buying and selling of goods. And I read about these when I was growing up. And when I missed out on the images in my textbooks, I always imagined that these tablets must be like very large, like 10 commandments large. Nope, they actually fit in the palm of your hand. And I found that out when we used the process of photogrammetry to capture those tablets from all sides and create reproductions or models that blind and sighted kids in classrooms are now able to touch in our classroom kits. So 3D printing really shines when you want to make a full representation of something to kind of bring all three dimensions of it to the perception of somebody who's blind or visually impaired. But 3D printing can be a little expensive, filament can be a little expensive, and 3D printing is slow. Each of those cuneiforms, each little tablet probably needed 3 to 4 hours, if not more, to print at a high resolution. So for everyday tactile graphics, we're going to focus much more on embossing, swell form, thermoform, and analog techniques. Now I've got Nefertiti, types of tactile graphics. Do you want me to talk a little bit more about that, or are we going back to you for that?
Oh, no, yeah, please go on.
For me? Okay. So I
Yes.
talked about the cuneiform. Sometimes for people starting out, whether your child is just really young or whether your child has just, like most of us, had this continuous lack of access to tactile graphics, we don't always start with the most complex tactile graphics that are available. A few of the things that we've found compelling for folks who are just starting out: raised, printed, and cursive letters, again, to help us with the accuracy of our handwriting. Basic images that might appear on holiday cards. So for example, we made hearts for Valentine's Day, wreaths and other kind of uh, winter things for the winter holidays, maybe a menorah. Those simple iconic images that sighted children take for granted, we have to make sure that we're making those available to blind kids as well. We use a system called TMAP, Tactile Map Automated Production. You can check it out by Googling it, and it'll pop up as belonging to the San Francisco Lighthouse. And that allows anyone who signs up for a free account, including you, to get a custom street map showing streets, the streets and intersections surrounding a point that you choose. You can print these out at any scale. They work really well for swell form. They also work for tactile graphics embossers, and they're really minimal, beautiful street maps. They have a little "you are here" circle, and then just lines showing intersecting streets. And at the edges of those lines, at the edges of those streets, concise Braille labels indicating what each street is. And the concise Braille label is spelled out with a full street name on a separate legend. So those are really great for beginners. I would say later elementary and upward, those are appropriate. Of course, it's also important to get infographics under the hands of kids and art images. One of the most fun things that I've gotten to do with the Dimensions Lab is to pursue my interest in some artists that I'd heard about but never experienced their work directly. I'll give you one example. Keith Haring images make great tactile graphics. Their elements are large and bold. They don't have a lot of background clutter. Subjects are usually foregrounded with just a little bit of abstract background. They make really high contrast prints if you're going to use swell form, but even if you're not, the large scale, the bold color differences, the lack of color, and the abstraction of familiar forms make Keith Haring images, I think, really interesting and fun to relate to. But you can experiment with any artists and any images that you may find pleasing. We also often capture architecture and capture other iconic images. We've had the pleasure of embossing an image of the Eiffel Tower, the whole thing, and then just zoomed in parts of the Eiffel Tower to see more about the structure. We have had the pleasure of embossing the SpaceX rocket that Elon Musk sent out. All these iconic images that you and I might take for granted if we're sighted or if we've been living in tactile graphics lab, but those everyday images are interesting to everyone. I think it's great that we have maps and graphs and charts in our Braille textbooks, but I think it's also important that we encourage youth and adults to think about the images that they've heard about, the images they want to connect to, the images that they want to see, and use the technology for tactile graphics to create access to those things that we really want to experience. I'm going to switch it back over to Nefertiti to talk about some things that lead to comfort and ease with tactile graphics when maybe it's not something that you're used to.
Perfect. Thank you. So, the first thing is to be persistent, have frequent access, and as Chancey said, start with something simple. Don't be afraid to ask for context and work with friends, family, or even visual interpreters to get more information and more familiar with the graphic that you're working with. Reading tactile graphics is not an inborn skill. It's a skill that needs to be practiced. There was a time when I would run my hands across lines and get nothing from them because I had not been taught to interpret or how to interpret the information before me. So I tend to equate this to a sighted person looking at something but not really seeing it, right? Most importantly, though, never, never, never forget that access is not a privilege. Access is a right. And with that mindset, remember how important this is for you and for all of us, as Chancey has said, and as Lauren, I'm sure will continue to emphasize here. It is for all of us. Thank you. I'll pass it now to Lauren and maybe get us started with the activity.
Wait, I think I've got one more
Or-
last minute insert
Oh,
to the
sorry.
outline. JK,
Okay.
plot twist. I'm talking again, sorry. So a few places where you can get graphics. Lauren's about to lead us through an awesome exercise in creating our own graphics, and like learning to draw has been one of the other great joys of my life during this time. But if you'd like to get some pre-existing graphics, shout out to a couple of sources. So the National Braille Press has quite a few books that have raised line graphics as part of them. So does I believe the American Printing House for the Blind does. And the American Printing House for the Blind also has an exciting array of tactile drawing tools. They have a drawing slate that helps you make different kinds of textured, dotted, and dashed lines. They have a tactile drafting tablet, and they have plenty of other tactile graphics activities. I also want to shout out sensationalbooks.com. Anne Cunningham is here tonight from Sensational Graphics, and Anne does really intricate and intricate's the wrong word, but really well curated and bold graphics that are suitable for early readers, all the way from ages 2, 3, 4, and up from there. And for adults and older kids, she sells the Sensational Blackboard in 2 sizes, which is a really affordable rubberized backboard that you can use to convert your regular drawings into tactile drawings. I'd also like to point out that the American Printing House for the Blind has the TGIL, Tactile Graphics Image Library. So you can just Google that, Tactile Graphics Image Library. All you've got to do is sign up and enroll yourself, and then you'll be able to download a variety of tactile graphics from there. If you want to learn more about tactile graphics and 3D printing and check out an additional library of models, you can acquaint yourself with the Benetech Diagram Center. So just Google Benetech, Benetech Diagram Center. They've got great guidelines on tactile graphics, incorporating Braille into 3D prints, and they are starting a tactile graphic image collection as well. And you should also reach out to C3D. C3D is headed up by a college student and has a super energetic community of volunteers. And what C3D will do is take your request for a 3D model, send it out to a volunteer, and send a blind child or adult a 3D model corresponding to whatever it is that they need to experience or see. There are many more resources out there. There are more every day. If you have particular needs, feel free to reach out to us one-on-one, and we can chat about our learnings, what we found out so far, and help steering you in the right direction. And with that said, I really will turn off my camera and pass it over to Lauren.
Thanks, Chancey. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Race from NYU. I'm really happy to be here tonight to take you through a little relaxing drawing exercise, which I've found really soothed me during quarantine. So one thing that happened to me during lockdown is I have a swell form machine at NYU, and I no longer had access to it after I wasn't allowed in the building anymore. So I got really into DIYing my own tactile graphics just as a necessity. And so I wanted to share with you the work that I've been doing in quarantine on tactile graphics. So we're going to do like a little brief like recap of what Chancey and Nefertiti went over, and then go into a little exercise. So tonight you're going to need, at the very least, if you want to join us, feel free. You can also just hang out. You'll need a ballpoint pen, just some regular cheap computer paper, and then either like a wood cutting board, which is what I use. If you have a Sensational Blackboard, that's great. You can also use a book or a magazine, but just one that you don't really care about because you're going to press into it and make marks on it and you don't want to ruin it. And then if you want to have even more fun, some folks that I've done this with, we've used scissors and glue. We've collected tactile stuff from the house for collaging that you can glue onto paper. You can use puffy paint if you have it, if you're patient and want to let it dry, or hot glue if you really have you're really stocked. I don't have hot glue. I'm really sad. I kind of want to get some, but anyway, I'm going to use a ballpoint pen and some computer paper tonight, just because it's fun for sketching. So this is something that Chancey talked a little bit about, but I wanted to cover it as well, which is when do we make tactile graphics? You know, we have verbal descriptions, but when is the time to choose between an image description, a verbal description, or a tactile graphic? So when is that best time to use a tactile graphic to describe an image or to create an image? And so there's a book by Polly Edmond called Tactile Graphics. It's a really big book. And so I kind of always joke that she kind of wrote the book on tactile graphics in a lot of ways. And so these are her suggestions that I wanted to share with you tonight. So when to make them. First is when the object is unavailable, like the stars. When the object is too small, like an insect with really fine detail. When an object is too large, like a tree, like a big sequoia tree. When an object is difficult to verbally describe, so like a rainbow. If it can't be touched, like something poisonous or dangerous, or something delicate like a snowflake, which if you touch it, it will melt. Or if the size relationship needs describing, if you want to compare the size of an elephant to a man, to a human. And then another little recap is how do we make them? What are the different methods available to us? So I tend to kind of categorize them into high fidelity and low fidelity. High fidelity meaning it's closer to the original object that you're trying to create or you're trying to draw, and low fidelity being less accurate, low resolution. So for high fidelity, like Chancey says, you can use embossing, which again is really great, but it is a dot matrix, so you do get a bit of pixelation. Also, Nefertiti mentioned like vacuum forming with a mold. And then finally, microcapsule printing, where you use a swell form or a microcapsule printer, and then really highly specialized paper, the microcapsule paper, which is pretty pricey. And if not, I like to do my own low fidelity ones, especially in quarantine, since I don't have access to those materials anymore. I've been making a lot of low fidelity graphics, and I find it really relaxing. And so you can use collaging methods where you cut things up and paste things on paper. You can use like text materials like felt and hot glue. You can use a hot glue gun to draw lines, and it draws, and those make great tactile graphics. And you can also use a piece of paper and you create raised lines on it by pressing a pen really hard into it. And so that's what a sensational blackboard does. But since mine is still locked at NYU, I've been using a cutting board. So the way that you do this method is you hold a piece of paper up to a surface that you don't mind marking up or pressing into. And then you use the ballpoint pen to press down really hard on the piece of paper. And then you flip the piece of paper over. So one thing to remember if you're going to use this method, it is reversed. So if you're not drawing something symmetrical, you want to draw it the opposite. So when you flip the piece of paper over, the left thing is on the left and the right thing is on the right. I always forget this, especially when it comes to marking the upper right-hand corner of the page for page orientation. And I'll go into that into a second. So there's a bunch of methods at our disposal. They're all really great. It depends on how much time you have and what you have in your house. But tonight, like I said, I'm going to be using the pen and cutting board. And so whatever method you choose to do tonight, if you'd like to join us, 4 tactile design standards apply. There are many tactile design standards, but I kind of reduce them down to a basic 4 that I think is really important for tactile discernibility. And so the first one is to cut the upper right-hand corner of your page off. You can either do a triple slash in that corner, or you can just cut the corner off, just so that when you're orienting the page, you know that the missing right corner goes on the right side of the page. So if you're going to do the ballpoint pen method, make sure you're doing that mark on the left side of the page, or you're removing the left corner, because you're going to flip the piece of paper over at the end. So that's the first one. And then the second standard is to just try to use 1 graphic per page. You want to take up as much of the page as possible. If you put too many items on your page, it starts to feel like tactile clutter. So generally speaking, 1 graphic per page. The third standard is hollow is more discernible than solid. So if you draw a duck and you draw the shape of a duck and the whole thing is filled in, You get less information than if it's just an outline, which you can trace with your fingers. So stick to outlines if you can. And then the fourth design standard is, generally speaking, you want to keep about 1/4 inch between all of your elements. If your elements are too close together, it's harder to discern. And again, it's going to feel like tactile clutter. So give everything some breathing room. And I always just tell myself about 1/4 inch in general. And so those are the standards. I'm going to also put them in the chat as well, so folks can refer to them if they need to. And we're going to take the time, we're going to take about 15 minutes. I'm going to go on mute. Feel free to go on mute, play some music, relax, and we're all going to draw if we'd like to. And then we're going to save the last 5 or 10 minutes to verbally describe our pieces of art. So feel free to also ask any questions to me, Chancey or Nefertiti during this time. This is kind of like our social hour while we draw. So I'm going to type those elements in the chat. Those tactile design standards.
I'm going to check out the chat for any questions that may have popped up.
Does anybody have any questions before we start about the ballpoint pen method?
If you don't mind, in the Q&A, someone had asked what was the resource to acquire tactile graphics. Is it CD3?
So C3D, SEE3D.org is the one that I had mentioned for 3D prints. And then
SEE3D.org.
yes.
Okay.
And that's for 3D prints.
Thank you.
And someone's asking, is there a document available that has all of these listed? There's probably not one unified document that has all of them. So I will write a couple more of them here in the chat. Let me make sure I'm not just writing to Lauren here. There we go. Oh, it looks like I can chat with all panelists, but I think only Jackie can chat with everyone. So Jackie, do you want to write out a couple more resources? There's the Tactile Graphics Image Library from APH. Oh, okay. I found it. All panelists and attendees.
Yeah, okay, good, okay.
Oh yeah, I put my tactile graphic standards to all panelists. Whoops, sorry guys. Let me change it. All attendees, okay. Try this again.
Okay. Benetech, Benetech Diagram Center. Sensationalbooks.com for early readers, and the Sensational Blackboard, and then National Braille Press and American Printing House for the Blind. They all have resources, and this list is not exhaustive. There are tactile graphics based books available in all kinds of places, but I think in particular these folks have plenty of equipment and plenty of books. APH, oh, go ahead.
No, someone had, I don't know if you missed this or not, but somebody asked where the custom maps came from too.
Oh, the custom maps, street maps, on demand, tactile map automated production, otherwise known as TMAP. Sign up for a free account. There we go.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, someone answered which artist is good for making images. I had said Keith Haring. Somebody put the proper spelling there. Thank you. But it's great to try different artists. I've tried some, and some need to be converted to black and white or need to be rescaled or recolored, and some just I would say in general, if the patterns are big and bold and high contrast, then you're probably looking at something that's pretty ready to be a tactile graphic.
Liechtenstein is really good for that.
Who was that?
Liechtenstein. He was a pop artist and has a lot of, I've actually touched some tactile graphics of his work and it was really nice.
I have not encountered, what is this, the cuddle bug?
Roy Liechtenstein.
Valerie Alcaraz, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, I'm sorry, has her hand raised. I'm going to allow her to talk.
Perfect.
Hi, Valerie. She's one of our known folks. Good to have you here.
Hey, Chancey and Nefertiti.
Hi.
I think I've attended another one of Lauren's tactile workshops maybe a year ago too. But I was curious if you knew of a book. I've seen it as a kid in elementary school. It was a thermoform book of all kinds of different trees. And I don't remember the name of it, but I've kind of been looking for it because it looked really cool when that I remember what I remember of it looked really neat when I was a kid, and it was something I'd want to refer back to see what different kinds of trees felt like in 2D form, to possibly implement into my own work. But it's like a song you can't remember. You remember parts of the lyrics, but you don't remember the title. It's kind of like that, but with a book, and I've not known where to find it since.
I do not
Or
know
if
the
it's just
tree
gone out of
book.
print because it's an older.
I would love to see that book. If
Yeah, it
anyone
was
else
very,
knows,
very
please put it in the
detailed.
chat.
Yes, please.
So someone's talking about the cuddle bug in the chat. If that person wants to unmute and tell us a little bit about it, that would be new knowledge for me. I've never have that experience with that machine. No pressure, but if you want to raise your hand, then we can unmute you. It's called the Cry-Cut Cuttlebug, Cuttlebug. So I guess I've seen vinyl cutting machines before, so maybe it's like that. You can emboss with regular Braille paper using heat, it says.
Interesting.
I don't know
Yeah.
about that brand of Cuttlebug, but I've heard of a Cricut machine. It can cut through wood. It can cut through different kinds of fabrics. A lot of them are very computerized, so it can be difficult for someone with total, being totally blind to use. But someone with low vision may have better success at using them because just, if VoiceOver isn't compatible on the app that goes with the Cricut machine, then you kind of have to, I would guess, maybe use a visual interpreter, or
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. My a family member has one, so I haven't gotten to play with hers, but there's one there's a Sizzix Big Shot, which isn't necessarily a Cricut, but it would I would say that would be easier for someone who is totally blind to use, like myself. But if there were ever a Cricut machine that could be more accessible, I would be up for trying it. And I think they're like
Awesome.
a couple $100 in price.
So Ann Cunningham is telling us in the chat that she's got a short video that lets you use a ballpoint pen and foam. It's a 3-minute video and it shows you how to do a drawing technique with foam. And so check out that YouTube video.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Anne.
It was very exciting.
Awesome. Nice. We're going to have to look up that Cuttlebug. To a thing that we said earlier about blind and visually impaired people having trouble using tactile graphic software, just to be clear, there is tactile graphic software out there that's pretty accessible. So in the lab, we use Tactile View, which has its own pros and cons, but it does let you sort of parametrically define shapes and lines and move them around and rotate things. So you've got to have pretty decent spatial awareness and a lot of patience. but it is very accessible. So that is out there. However, in terms of computer aided design, we don't quite have a two-dimensional tactile canvas that's available for consumers in a digital form yet. So we can't see the results of our work immediately. We have to emboss and check and emboss and check. And then there are other tactile graphics programs out there like the Tiger Designer that actually are not fully accessible with a screen reader. And so we have the awareness, we have the spatial abilities, we have the cognitive abilities, but technology just needs to catch up to us. That said, if you do have a child or a teen, or maybe for yourself, the desire to create tactile graphics accessibly or 3D prints accessibly, there is software out there that'll let you do it. It's just that you have to hold a lot of spatial information in your head until such time as you can emboss something or print something and check out the quality of your work. So for 3D images, do you have a couple examples of images you've seen that have been helpful in understanding a concept? I will say for me, architectural images have been extremely helpful. A few years ago, we did an exhibition about the Triumphal Arch at Palmyra, which was destroyed by ISIS. And photogrammetry was used to rebuild a quarter scale model, which is still too big for someone to comprehend non-visually. And the folks who were in charge of that exhibition actually did several zoom out panels of various decorative features from the arches, and that was an exhibition at our library, and I felt like I had much more of a grasp of the architecture being used, of the decorative elements being used after encountering that. And another one is the cuneiform that I mentioned earlier. Again, I had thought that those cuneiform were just large. You would maybe hold them in two hands. And I didn't really get the idea that they were handheld. They were essentially receipts for the buying and selling of goods in ancient Sumeria. And after holding the 3D print, I could much more easily conceptualize how that would fit into someone's life and what that was like. And also that I think a blind person during that time could have maybe been a scribe because they were so deeply and tactilely inscribed. Nefertiti, what about you? What images notably have stood out to you that were 3D?
Images to me in 3D printing. Well, I love the rendering of the umbrella handle, the parrot.
That's right. We have the umbrella handle from Mary Poppins also in our Rare Books collection.
Yes, I love that. Mary Poppins is a favorite of mine from childhood. Let's think. 3D
Did you see any of the 3D
images.
PhotoWorks photos?
No, sadly, I didn't. Either I wasn't around or wasn't at an event for it. I don't know, but no, I have not. I want to. Do we have any? I know we're not open to the public as of yet, folks, at the Andrew Haskell Brown Talking Book Library, but
not at the moment. We don't.
Not at the
but
moment.
I always think about the Neil Armstrong footprint, just like deep in the moon sand or in the moon dust. Oh, that was better.
I want to check that out. I did check out the Hancock signature.
Yes, we have John Hancock's original signature. That does not need to be 3D printed. That we have as a nice, bold swell form.
Yes. Yeah. But 3D prints, so far, that's my favorite in our collection.
Not everything needs to be a 3D print. Jackie, are you able to copy these items from all panelists so that everybody can see them?
Yeah, I've been going through and doing
awesome.
that.
Thank you so much.
Talking.
This is so generative. Thank you so much.
No problem. Let me see. Somebody wanted to share some pictures, and I'm not quite sure how they want to do that. If they, Esmirna, I don't know if you want to email them to me, or I'm not sure if, because I've never done this.
I don't think the chat has that affordance, but you could link to, if you have a Pinterest or If they're in a Dropbox folder, you could link to them, but we're not going to see them here in the chat. All right, so it's about 7:51. Lauren, how are you feeling about kind of guiding people through a moment with their drawings?
Yeah, I'd love to. And just it's really for volunteers who feel comfortable and want to share what they've made. And I'll give an example with my the snowman that I drew. But it's been snowing a lot in New York, so I've been in a very I'm kind of over the snow now, but I'll celebrate the end of winter. And I drew a snowman, and I cut the upper right-hand corner of the page off. So while I was drawing it on the other side of the paper, I cut off the left-hand corner so that when I flipped the page over, it was the right side. And so if using a clock face at the 12 o'clock, my snowman is wearing a top hat, and then he has three layers to him. So the base is a big snowball, and then the middle base is a medium-sized snowball, and then his head is a smaller snowball at the top, and he has 2 eyes made of coal, and then he has a triangular carrot nose, and he kind of has a bit of a half smile, and then he has at the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock of the middle snowball, he has 2 sticks coming out of him as his arms. And then he has little coal buttons all down the front of the snowman. So that's my snowman drawing.
Sounds lovely, Lauren.
Nefertiti.
I don't know what I drew. I did some doodling here. I tried to go for I don't know, like Chancey actually over the weekend led us in a origami exercise and walked us through making a lotus flower. So I tried rendering that as a drawing. I'm not sure that I was as successful drawing it as I was origamiing it, if that's even a thing. But I tried. So yeah, that was fun.
I love that you created a lotus flower out of folded paper and then drew that form as a 2D drawing.
Tried. Yeah. Would anybody else like to share with us?
If you want, you can even share a past tactile graphic that you've made that you can verbally describe if you don't want to describe your drawing tonight.
It's ready for you. You are muted.
Meredith, if you want to go ahead and share your description.
Okay, so I made, hold on, where is it? I made a duck, like I drew a duck, and it has a beak that looks like its beak's in the air, like it's displeased. It has a wing and it's sitting on a nest.
Nice.
Oh, that sounds very nice.
Did in school today.
And also, it's not right next to me, but I did, in school, I did a similar thing with a little wooden mallet and a piece of tin. But I wasn't really drawing a specific picture. It's just sort of like, designs.
What happened? Yeah. I love working with tin, Meredith. And I don't know if you've gotten into it, but I love working with wire and making wire sculptures.
I'm trying to show
If anybody is sighted, Meredith does have it. She's
right here.
She's showing the camera. Want to try to describe that piece of paper is about 9.5 by 11 inches, and then you put the tape around the edge to protect the rough edge.
More like to protect my fingers.
Yes. And then how did you just do like a free form, almost like a stained glass window effect with just raised images that made triangles and rectangles
It's like
and then a central swirl?
I used a wooden stick.
Like a skewer, like a kebab skewer?
Sort of felt like a pencil, but no lead.
Oh, okay. Almost like a fat stylist.
Yeah,
Yep.
actually, I think that's what it was.
Yep.
Awesome.
Pretty sure.
Creative,
Awesome.
yeah.
And do you want to tell them how old you are, like what grade level you are for where you did this art project?
13 and then 7th grade.
Excellent. So
Thank
glad
you,
you're here with
Jane.
us today.
Thanks.
That sounds so cool.
I'm her Meredith's mom, and I found it very informative as well because right now with Meredith in math class, we're working on geometrical forms, and a lot of times it's cubes and spheres and cones and not just flat. So it was trying to, of course, with virtual learning, trying to learn how to make a depiction that she can get a frame of reference and without reinventing the wheel. So now knowing that I can get some of these things printed for me instead of having to make them all myself is extremely helpful. So I think it's going to help the education process go a little more smoothly as well.
Excellent.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for being such an invested parent. Way to go, Meredith and Mom. That's great.
So
Thank
I'm
you so
putting
much.
into the chat, check out Joan Horvath's geometry curriculum. I'm going to see if I can pull it up for you. Because you can actually, if you have a 3D printer available at school or at home, you can actually follow a geometry curriculum and it has 3D printed proofs for everything.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful resource. Thank you so much.
And it's at
Yeah,
this website,
absolutely.
non-scriptum. So I'm going to link you to that and you'll find the geometry sectum. You're going to find the geometry section there.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
You're
There you go.
welcome.
Right.
I'm not sure if I can, because of voiceover, I'm not sure if I can find the mute. So if I am not muted, oh, I was able to find it. Excellent.
Okay, no worries, no worries. All right, folks, so it is 7:58. Do we have any last thoughts or share outs? This has been such a lovely opportunity. Thank you.
This has been. Thank you so much, Jackie, and for all of you who attended. Keep it up, keep it going, keep the interest alive, spread the word, use these resources, share them.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes,
so much, everyone. This has been such a pleasure.
Yes,
Right,
thank
you.
you so much for sharing. I have launched a poll. If everybody would just take a quick second to complete that, that would be greatly appreciated. There were so many wonderful resources that were mentioned tonight that I have never heard of that I'm kind of anxious to share. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Joyous, she says. Thank you so much. Right.
When we did get some pictures emailed, but unfortunately, I don't think I might be able to share them because I can email everybody who participated. I can try and do that for everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great evening.
Have a great night.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.